But we should add to this what Anand was also doing, and ask the question what we do, not only who we are we assholes or great minds and great humanists, but also what we do. And this could be a new challenge to anybody who wants to write or say anything about ethics. And in this way, again, I would say that my dear Jernail Anand is in a way leading the way. So let's ask ourselves what we do. And one of the challenges and tasks of this academy is to ask these questions and do something about it. Thank you. I don't hear you. I didn't hear anything. Is there a response? Okay. Have you heard me?
Yes.
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 Yes, Dr. Maja, you are just giving a kind of a trajectory of the importance of ethics in the post-truth era, especially in literature. You went around it, incorporating the role of AI and the fast changes that are happening in the world of technology even. Thank you so much. It was wonderful, your introduction. Thank you.
You're more than welcome, and I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about this topic.
Yeah.
Would you like me to shall I speak, or are you going
Yes,
to... Sorry?
Yes, I request
It's
Dr. Payel
breaking.
to moderate the session now. We have just introductory welcome note by Pollachi, and now I request Dr. Payel to moderate the session. Yes.
Thank you, Randhir. There has been a little bit of a technical issue. Is my voice audible?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I had joined long back, but there was some kind of a issue in which I had to be added to the broadcast, and hence I could see everything incognito, but you could neither see or hear me. Today's panel discussion, the beginning actually happens like a post-truth, because you are there and you're not there. So the truth and the fact, they have a conflict. So when we talk about the challenges before literature in the post-truth era today, before we go to any discussion of the post-truth implies that there's an assumed understanding of truth. So in order to understand or analyze post-truth, one has to first grapple with the notion of truth. Does truth refer to facts and evidence? Can we access an objective truth? And if there was never any real truth and only truths, then what is the sudden fuss over post-truth, and what are its implications? These questions themselves pose a very postmodernist skepticism about the truth, concept of truth in general. It is a very important point to note that the Oxford English dictionaries explain the post-truth as relating, and I quote, relating to or donating circumstances in which the objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to the emotional personal belief. This has resulted in a lot of propaganda and also the rise of the social media, the AI, has all contributed to what we now call as a post-truth era. In such a situation, a debate or a discussion regarding post-truth becomes very, very important. And I would be happy, because we have lost a bit of time, so it would be great to have Dr. Philip, and I think Dr. Philip Benesch, am I spelling your name correctly? And he's the Director of Pre-Law Programs and Director External Fellowships, Associate Professor, Political Science at Lebanon Valley College, USA, to kindly give your opinion in the form of a talk today in this seminar. Thank
Well,
you.
I didn't expect to be giving a talk. I just thought I'd respond to one of the original observations that the first speaker had made, that the vice president of your academy. And I agree that there is this sense of crisis and this sense of anxiety, indeed, that we have, that we cannot identify the truth among all the claims and claimants to the truth. That seems to be a particularly modern or postmodern sense of risk and sense of anxiety that we are all coping with. And I would imagine those who do social media, I don't do much social media at all. I'm very, very infrequently involved in that, but I would imagine if you're plugged into social media, there are so many conflicting stories that you are exposed to, and they are narratives, they're stories, they're like fiction in the sense in which you have originally engaged with, in that you do not know quite how far they resemble the truth. But is this modern? I think that was one of the things that you had, the moderator had very kindly initiated by saying, and I think, we've always faced this problem. There are those in positions of power that sought to explain what the truth was, and they had academia, and they had the church and other organized religious bodies and government bodies and major media behind them, and they could speak with one voice, or more or less with one voice, and say this is, quote, the truth. What we are facing now is actually, in many ways, a good thing, a democratization of claiming or claims to the truth. And I think we're now moving to a somewhat different approach, and perhaps a healthier approach that could have existed all along. Truth, I think, today means exactly what it has always meant, but we can approach it in a very different way. So let me suggest that what we mean by truth, and you asked specifically about objective truth, always means that it is a claim that corresponds with the facts, whatever they may be identified. That's the good Aristotelian approach. But what we can't ever do that. we can't ever have all the facts, and we can't be sure that what we claim as a description of facts that we have available measures up to the truth. It's always a partial take on the facts. So history, for example, can be written from multiple different points of view. It can necessarily, because you have to put thousands of years into maybe one or two volumes, it is always selective. It always leaves something out. And but despite its selectiveness and partiality, some historical interpretations may, in one sense, be truer than others. And the way I suggest we approach this is not positively, but negatively. Have they left out such facts that are crucial, as that if they were included, they would they would subvert the interpretation being advanced? And if so, the omission of such facts becomes, I think, an indication of the error, the untruthfulness of the interpretation, and of a need for better efforts to repair that particular deficiency. So going back to the current situation, you've previously had very powerful interests, be they government or big media or other, essentially the rich and the powerful, saying what is true. through academia and through religious organizations in some ways as well. Now you have the opportunity for almost anyone who, even if they are not an expert, to point out error, to point out flaws, to say the emperor has no clothes. You know, the little boy who is in the back and doesn't realize it's not his place to say that the emperor, in fact, is not actually wearing clothes when et cetera, et cetera. So we have the ability through this kind of democratization in this era of criticism, of the ability to reveal error, and by revealing error, perhaps in some respects, to identify those claims which are less truthworthy than others. So I think, you know, the idea of truth hasn't gone away. We're just approaching it now negatively and in a democratic fashion rather than hierarchically through ruling mechanisms and institutions. And there are some very good aspects to that. Now, what it does, of course, is it also opens up a lot of anxiety and an opportunity for manipulation if we're not prepared for that. And I am horrified by the fake news and the claims of alternative facts that sometimes manipulate people to take violent action in particular. And we have to find an antidote to that, I think. So that would be my opening observation on that.
Thank you, Dr. Benesch. Actually, yes, I kind of agree when you talk about the post-truth, the era opening up the democratization of the criticisms to understand the pathways that can be representative of what is truth. And the discussion actually takes us to a lot of understanding of the things that you have just mentioned about misinformation, disinformation, fake news, which creates so much of polarities within societies. And for example, in our own countries, we have seen that how much it can become, the hot pot of extreme manipulation, and it lays down the foundations for a very divisive, problematic approaches to the notion of truth itself. And my concern is that, is there a possibility of understanding the production of newer literatures when we are dealing with a condition like post-truth? I would invite with this thought Dr. Selvin. He's the HOD and the Vice Principal of Sree Saraswathi Thyagraja College, Pollachi, Tamil Nadu, to share his point of view and continue the discussion. I think you're still muted. You have to unmute yourself. Dr. Selvin, you're muted. I think you have to unmute yourself. There's one mute icon. You just have to click on it to see if you are muted or not.
Oh, I think it's better now.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for guiding me to reach the truth icon of muting and unmuting. Okay. Thank you, Payel. And thank you, Anand ji, for inviting me. And the topic really is a very good one because it put me into a thinking mode for the past 10-15 days. Dr. Anand ji, thank you for making my days sleepless for the past 10 days. First of all, I would like to touch on the topic itself, challenges before literature in post-truth era. We know post-truth era that we are already struggling to read newspapers, correct? When you open the newspaper, a sense of distrust sort of sneaks in. You can't believe what you're reading. That means good. You are living in post-truth era. The title says challenges before literature. I was sort of wondering about that preposition before for quite a long time. It's because that preposition before has an adverbial force also. Before is an adverb as well as a preposition and a conjunction. Let me take the adverbial force and the prepositional force in this topic. If I take before, it becomes a time marker as an adverb. That means before literature in the post-truth era. If I take it as a place marker, that means what stands in front of us. What are the challenges that looms large in front of literature as a body of knowledge or body of activity or whatever it might be, because I don't want to define literature now. We will leave that to a different forum. So the preposition before or an adverb before it itself is creating a sort of a existential question to me. I know Dr. Payel has elaborated on what is post-truth. I don't want to go there. I want to touch on how many truths we have, the category of truths. I think a decent internet research would give you three types of truth, that is personal truth, political truth, and objective truth. I want to move that into a philosophical discussion. We have a further refined classification, that is objective truth and subjective truth. Subjective truth involves mental states. If I'm going to say something is good to me, that means my mental state is involved. That is subjective truth. If I'm going to talk about objective truth, which is universal, I think this is all the old transcendental term. We have called it as universal values in literature. When we say universal, that is objective, we say there will be no mental states involved. If the sun crosses from east to west, there is no need for a person in Punjab or Pennsylvania or in Pollachi has to have a different mental state to understand. It's all the same. It moves from east to west. That is objective truth. The question now is, do we have objective truth? That I'll park it for some time, because that's the function we are going to do it now. I don't want to call it as job or business. That's the function of this forum. Then I want to touch, that's point number one. Point number two is susceptibility to bias. Because I want to introduce the psychological term called bias, because the first is philosophical term, the second one is the psychological term bias. If we move into psychological discussion, psychoanalytical discussion, I have to talk about a lot of types of biases. It will become a classroom discussion. I will talk about the internet bias. Whatever we want to do these days, we fail to go to dictionaries, correct? We go to Google to check for meaning. That's the first problem. That's the first problem I'm finding it with my students. They say, I have a mobile phone. I quickly check meaning in Google. That's okay. Search engines on the internet are the epitome of confirmation bias. Do we understand the architecture behind internet? Internet is, they say artificial intelligence, that's all crap. Because internet portals are pages written by hundreds of millions of people available in multiple computers. Google makes them, they have crawler bots. I come from IT industry also, I understand this in and out. So they have crawler bots, they go into all the pages and store the information in their servers. Whenever you click what is the meaning of fake, with the available information within their server, they push it to you. That means if no one has written anything on objective truth in the internet, that means that's not available, that doesn't exist. We are living in a stupid world. If no one would have written about a flower called rose in the internet, then we will say the flower rose does not exist today. That's the confirmation bias we are facing, and everyone believes that Google is the truth. The technological availability as a tool of veracity. I repeat, technological availability as a tool of veracity. For example, WhatsApp and Facebook creates big problems in heavily populated countries. So only when riots happen, the governments shut down the internet. Not to close Google or Princeton Encyclopedia, no. They want to close down WhatsApp and Facebook. They can't do it portal by portal. They just shut down the dam itself. If internet connectivity is the pipe is the dam, they want to, because that's the easiest way they can do. This is number two. Third thing, is science true? Because we always seem to believe that science is true and literature is dreaming, daydreaming, and these things. Yes, science is true because it is true whether you believe it or not. It is true. When you touch the flame of the candle, it burns your fingers. You can call it as science. You believe it or not, you want to touch for yourself. Even then, the heat of the flame remains the same. The tissue will get damaged. That's one sort of yes. No, because science keeps changing and evolving. Let me take the history of the structure of atom. First, J.J. Thomson came and said one thing. Then Rutherford came and said one thing, and Niels Bohr came and said one thing. So their scientific discoveries changed. So how would you want me to believe that truth, you call it as something as true in this era? I believe it as true, but after 50 years they're going to change it and evolve. Come on. What I believed as true 50 years ago will not going to be as truth after 50 years. So science is not true, but it is true. That's a very ambiguous. Number 4, who is a skeptic? We always say skeptic as a bad word. I just want to put sort of a small definition about skeptic. A proper skeptic, we have bad skeptics and good skeptics, right? Everywhere. A proper skeptic questions whether they are whatever they are unsure of, they will question. But when you give some evidence, the skeptics will accept. But if you have blind faith, even if with evidence, you will not accept. That's what happened in the case of Trump referendum and Brexit. So a skeptic is a better person than a person with blind faith. Now the function of the forum, I'm coming to the function of the forum, what Dr. Anand ji has his life's mission as. He knows there are some truths hiding everywhere because he have read a lot of his books and poems and everything. He knows what are objective truths. Now, do we know how to communicate that to others? That's the function of this forum. Because there is a what part of it and how part of it. This is Anandji's function. I would say this is the role of literature. What is the role of literature? Literature knows what is truth. And literature knows how to communicate what and how. That we are, as a team, we are having it. I want to quote, do a quote. I'll take only 2 more minutes. I know I'm talking a lot in this forum. Payel, am I doing on my time well? I couldn't hear you, Payel.
Just a second. Yeah, sorry, I was on the mute. Yeah, of course, you are fine. Not a problem.
Okay. See, I would rather want to drag that guy Nietzsche. I love him and I hate him for various reasons. Okay, I want to drag that guy Nietzsche here. He says, "What is truth?" I think he was the first person to really talk about the truth as we are talking. I think he's Sort of, he's a crack and he's a lunatic, I know, but he has really given us some real good aphorisms to think about. He says, truth is a mobile army of metaphors, metonymies, anthropomorphisms. In short, a sum of human relations which were poetically and rhetorically heightened, transferred, and adorned. The last thing is, and after long use, it seems solid, canonical, and binding to a nation. So now, truth is something like, what do you create? It is not real. Now the question is, what is real and what is not real? When we say fake news, we should not confuse with truth. Fake news and real news, because truth itself is something sometime people create and it becomes canonical, binding to a nation, blinding the nation. I don't want to take examples here. I know everyone knows what I'm talking. The seventh point I want to talk about is literature and science. Which is closer to truth? Immediately people would jump and say, oh, science is true. Oh, wow. Yeah, I know. Because we are living in an artificial intelligence world of artificial intelligence and everything. Science declares, I'm just using Paul the Mans, the famous Yale deconstructor's argument. He says, science starts that it is going to say, it is going into the journey of finding truth, and it says lies. Because every 50 years, the science changes. Now, Darwin's theory is questioned by Stephen C. Meyer. And who knows, after 100 years, someone will question Stephen C. Meyer's theories. It will keep changing. So science starts that, declares that it's going to reach truth, and it doesn't reach truth. I won't say it reaches falsity, I will not say. But literature never claimed it is going to talk about truth. The function of literature is not to talk about truth, but in the end, it reaches truth. Now the forum should decide what should they take. Because the purpose of a poet is not to talk about truth. He is observing. Let me take Wordsworth, right? He observes, he processes, he compares, analyzes, and he just observation, perception. And most of the poets, by the end of their project, that we call it as poems or your novels or everything, we derive the truth out of it because it is their observations. That is point number 7. Now, I want to touch upon the fake news part of it because we live in a very serious world where everything is called as fake. Fake is I just checked the etymology of the word fake. Fake is a German word from fegen. Fegen means it is sweep. Now you understand, right, why fake news is spreading like wildfire. Because the meaning of the original word is sweep, and another meaning is thrash. It thrashes the population. It sweeps the population. It thrashes the population. It thrashes basic understanding. I want to take Samuel Taylor Coleridge's concept of suspension of disbelief here. When I read the newspaper, do you want me to suspend my disbelief? My newspaper is a piece of literature every day.
It's got a willing
That's
suspension of disbelief.
yeah, willing suspension. Yeah. Now it is a forced suspension, Payel.
Yeah.
So so only I ignored the word willing because I'm now forced. If I have to read newspapers, I'll tell you now, if I read some news portals here and there, I have to check who is the owner of the portal, which party is funding it, which businessman is funding that portal. Why should I check that? Newspapers have lost their news value. Okay. My last piece of discussion is I want to compare 3 people who talked about objective truth. One is Immanuel Kant, the second one is Hegel, the third one is Marx. Immanuel Kant I think it's very beautiful because now we say that subjective truth is mental state, objective truth is no mental state. That's a very kindergarten way of understanding objective truth. But Kant says objective truth is produced by the unity of subject and object.
Mm.
Now he actually makes both come together, like a unity of subject and object. Hegel radicalized that and he says it's the unity, and he brings the third element. The third person I want to talk about is Marx. Karl Marx says objects are given already to us before we subjectively have to reconstruct it. Now, the entire truth itself looks like it has been given as an object. We have to reconstruct it. That's very painful and traumatic. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, thank you for taking the discussion forward and opening up, I would say, a box of questions that we can debate and discuss in the panel, whatever time is left. I would now like to have some comments from Dr. Anand on the topics that have been discussed today. What is your point of view and opinion about this idea of post-truth and the challenges that are there in front of us in today's era? You have to unmute yourself. Not yet. You have to again see if you can unmute.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you very much. I have been writing poetry, and we have been in this profession for quite long, maybe more than 50 years. So creating literature has become really, it has faced a roadblock now. Previously, I don't think there were so many problems. Whatever people felt, they would say. But now, language and communication have become problems. So the banner of truth has always been held aloft by writers, scholars, and poets, even of yesteryears. As it was discussed now, Dr. Philip was saying about the democratization of truth. So the idea of post-truth, I think, hit the headlines in 2016 when it became the word of the year, according to the dictionary, and it has come to signify that, contrary to established beliefs, truth is not singular. I think today this is being underlined that truth is not singular, it is not unitary, and people can invent what truth means for them. And if they are in power, they can force it down the throat of the resistless mass. The mass is resistless, can't resist. English philosopher Julian Baggini thinks that for most of human history, there was some stable combinations of trust in religious texts and leaders, learned experts, and enduring folk wisdom called common sense. But now it seems virtually nothing is universally taken as an authority. This leaves us having to pick our own experts or simply trust our own guts. Nietzsche argues that humans create the concepts through which they define good and bad, thereby replacing the concept of truth with the concept of value and grounding reality in the human will and will to power. So he talks of all insights and ideas arise from a particular perspective. We are living in the era of virtual truth. It is an improvement upon real truth. It is really unfortunate. I have to use the word real before truth. Real truth is illusion. So we create virtual truth. So what is perception? It is a very commonly used word today. Perception is a tempered truth. And for this, governments resort to, as we were talking, fake news or media management. Media actually acts like a cosmetological surgeon who can change even the face of an individual and is faithful. Truth in our society is forever exiled. What we come across are perceptions, narratives, and make believe. Make belief and suspension of disbelief, Dr. Selvin was talking. The reporters who think they should report the truth. I am making a reference to something in Indian uh, contemporary history. The reporters who think they should report the truth soon find themselves under the earth with trees planted on their buried bodies. If you can relate to it, Sarsa, I can just give you a hint. Old times were different. Perhaps during those days, truth was not so bitter in its taste as we find it in these days, in these times of post truth. Poetry, in a way, deals with eternal values of life, and it deals also with truth. Keats said, truth is beauty and beauty truth. It had its relevance when the idea of truth was unitary, it had its relevance in the agrarian society, which was rooted in truthful living. But poetry has vanished from the reckoning of the world today, which believes not in truth, but its various versions, in narratives, in perception, or make believe, as I have said. Thus, we have diluted the idea of truth, and it is no wonder now we love fiction. This is the world of fiction. And what is fiction? On the first page, it is written. It is a work of fiction. There is nothing real in it. If at all it resembles anybody, it is mere coincidental. This, I think, is the starkest and the darkest example of post-truth era, where you cannot believe anything that is being served to you. You are in an uncertain state where things are being placed before you, and yet you are told not to believe them because they have no truth in them. So, post-truth world is a doctored one, a manufactured one, articulated by an artificial vision from which God is absent. The world which believed in truth also believed in beauty. The post truth world neither values truth nor beauty. We are living in a world which is denuded of its intrinsic values, its beauty, and its truth. Human life, it appears, has gained a lot of artificial beauty. You can see there is a lot of artificial beauty, but essentially, man has lost honor and his sense of shame. Literature has to peel off the layers which cover and disfigure the intrinsic beauty of it. So we are ranged as literary persons, we are ranged against that monolith of untruth. Literature is pitted against false narratives. Literature must know It has a higher pedestal in the scheme of things, and it must not come down to the level of a commodity. Literature stands beyond all this to address the essential and basic issues of mankind. And the most basic issue of mankind is to save truth from being framed, divided, and discredited. So thank you very much. These are my views about this. Now you can continue, Dr. Payal.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anand, for summing up with a positive note about how literature should have its own quest for truth intact, even though there has been a lot of disruptions and we have faced with a challenge and crisis in understanding this concept of truth. Uh, I think it is probably time now. I can invite Dr. Molly Joseph to share a few words, and then we can go to a lot of comments and questions that have come, because I think the panel would choose to address to some of the issues, and I would request the people, those who are the audience, to please put your questions and we can direct them to um, the most specific person you're wanting to ask, and we can close uh, in the next 30 minutes. We can have more discussion opening up, not just limited to the panel. Is that okay, Dr. Anand?
Yeah, I think let Dr. Molly speak at the end. We
Good.
invite
Okay.
discussion.
Yeah.
Better, better.
Yeah.
I think we saw
I
some
can,
of the questions coming
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Dr. Molly Joseph, you can speak now, and then after your opinion, we can go and open up the panel to more questions.
Dr. Payal, as Dr. Jernail said, I can speak at the end. I kind of, let the discussions
Uh,
go on. The
yeah,
pertinent things that are raised
Okay.
can
All
be
right.
discussed.
Fine.
Okay.
Fine. Fine.
she
Okay.
All
will
right.
give a vote of thanks also at
Yeah.
the
All
end of
right. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So there are good number of questions that have come. Uh, I can see that there has been a lot of points discussed already, and the a very lively chat box is a wonderful thing for any panel. It shows that there has been discussions going on, not just limited to the panel. Shuchi Sharma, I can see your question. Um, can you hear me? Okay. So Shuchi has a question, which is, what is an example of a post-truth? In this form of post-truth politics, false rumors such as the Muslim conspiracy theories about Barack Obama make a major news topics. In the case of Pizzagate conspiracy, this resulted in a man entering the Comet Ping Pong pizzeria and firing on AR-15 rifle. Okay. Anybody would like to take up this question from Shuchi?
Yeah, I think I would start the discussion around this question.
Okay.
I can't answer, but I would create a discussion around this question. So, whatever examples we find, that's okay. There is another term that is coming here. There is a rumors. See, rumors have their own history in the world. Rumors are false narratives, are sold as truths with loaded intentions to achieve something. That is, I would rather say that's a rumor. There is something called the entertainment rumor about the Hollywood personalities and the sports personalities. That's When it becomes a political rumor or a public rumor, it becomes very dangerous. For example, I'll tell you there is a one gentleman. I don't know whether I can call him a gentleman. Still, I would like to call him a gentleman because I see myself as a gentleman. So I have to call him Mr. Joseph Goebbels. I think everyone knows this person. Joseph Goebbels, he is the chief propagandist of Nazi party. He is a close associate, close aide, friend, confidant to the Führer, Hitler. So he had a ministry. Wow, that's amazing. He had a ministry unto himself to create post-truth, to achieve the effects of post-truth through rumors to through false narratives. So the history had or has someone has done it officially under the war pressures. That's okay. Now it has become order of the day. So that is the problem. See this Muslim conspiracy theories of Barack Obama, Pizzagate. These are one in million examples. What's happening in the world around? That's what I say. Can you open the newspaper and say it is news? No. I'll tell you why. Because I worked for newspapers as a back-end software provider in IT companies. Okay, I've been to Chicago Tribune. I have worked for Times. I visited New York many times to Times office because I'm IT guy. We will be selling transformational software and platforms and everything. When we heard that Jeff Bezos bought a newspaper, now tell me what is the intention? Because now the money lies with new age entrepreneurs, the tech entrepreneurs. They want to buy newspapers. In the US, I know lot of print ads went down because newspapers couldn't survive. That's the history. So now, why a tech age entrepreneur would want to buy a newspaper? So there is something else, right? They want to be part of in the creation of the news. Do we think someone has to create news or gather news? I think we collect news. There's a new news desk that gathers news, collects news, but now they are creating news. I think this is a topic I want to really sort of park here and discuss because newspapers are one that comes to our doorstep with some information. How much we can rely them upon? That's the question I want to sort of park here.
Would you mind if I come in on that as well? Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you. So I think what you have observed is interesting, but it's not new. And you mentioned Joseph Goebbels. Goebbels died 80 plus years ago. He was the minister from 1933 in Nazi Germany, and this is not that's not new. And indeed, in some respects, you can even find in Goebbels' approach and his praxis some of the things that you commended in Nietzsche. I think that there is this. So the foundations of post-truth lying, false narratives, goes way back, and unfortunately has a close connection with big-moneyed interests or big politically empowered interests. You mentioned Jeff Bezos. He's not the first. There are lots of Americans who buy, millionaires who buy TV or newspaper. Frankly, when they are in a position of power, when they're in a position of money, they seek to influence the news and influence the media. And it seems to me that what you're pointing to, Jeff Bezos, again, is not a new phenomenon by any means. And I would imagine it's not just in the United States. It's found in Australia, it's found in Britain, and it's probably found all over the rest of the world as well. That you have this need for powerful members of the ruling class to also have an opportunity to frame the truth. You mentioned that newspapers used to just collect the news. I don't think they ever did. I think news has always been selective and edited. Not saying that they sought to distort it, but that they have never been passive. They have always been actively editing and putting forward so that the facts that are reported meet with their understanding of truth, which is often ideological or often has some framing that is beyond the immediate news story. I think that you have long had people look at newspapers and read between the lines, asking of a newspaper, what are they not reporting? What are they lying to me about? For example, many of the communists in interwar Europe, for example, had that problem where newspapers were owned by large corporations or owned by very well-connected members of the bourgeoisie, that they were trying to find the real news, often by having to see what was omitted or what was biasedly reported. So I don't think this is a new phenomenon by any means. I do want, if at a later question, we come back to the question of science and truth, because I think you raised some very interesting questions in your presentation that I'd like to have a chance to come back on maybe at some point. But thank you.
Yeah, I agree, because when we talk about there was this point I think 2017 or something, when Trump called the climate change a Chinese hoax to ruin the American economy. And the point that we need to note now is that the climate change deniers will negate the fact that don't conform to their ideology, right? And hence they'll say there is no climate change. So it's not just the careless disregard or the complete abandonment of facts. Post-truth also thrives in the manipulation of the process, and it's a corruption in the machinery of cherry-picking certain facts, which is going to suit the belief and generate certain kinds of information silos, projecting an agenda that has to be established as a truth to some kind of to give some kind of a emphasis, or rather place somebody in some position, something that has been there in the history for a very, very long time. We have also had geographic records, people giving their versions, which are sometimes not even true at all. But taking the discussion further, we have some very interesting questions lined up. Raul, I'm sorry if I have misspelled your name, but your question is, what role has our desire for convenience played in the apparent decline of objective truths? Dr. Anand, would you like to attend to this question?
Please repeat the question.
What role has our desire for convenience played in the apparent decline of objective truths? Let me read a couple of questions, and I think the respected panelists can pick up. The other question is, do you think that social media networking may be a powerful means for the tampering of truth? And one more question is, how do you identify paid news? How to separate the grain from the chaff? I think we have had a bit of discussion, but still a bit on this.
What is the question about social media? I would like to answer that.
Social media is, I think, a question by Maja, and he says that, do you think that social networking may be a powerful means for the tampering of truth?
The question is that who is using the social media? All the social media, they are not doing this type of job. There are certain, motivated people who have a particular mission against or for some political bosses. Only these people are involved in tampering with the truth. Otherwise, I think social media is giving us so much of information. But the question is that whether they can do it or not. Definitely, social media is very powerful these days because social media is not controlled. Although governments are trying to control social media also, but it is still free, a lot free, and if we want proper information, we get it only from social media. Otherwise, the channels which are going on, most of them, don't provide us the right news. They try to temper the news or fake media management. Everything goes on in the name of information, which is actually no information at all. They are just trying to create an unnatural, climate of thought.
Okay. Uh,
Yeah,
there is,
Payal, I would like to add a point to Dr. Anand, whatever
okay.
he said. See, social media, when it was invented, it was very sort of a platform to connect people. That's where Facebook and Twitter and these things were invented. And we create groups in the social media. For example, in 2015, there was a big flood in Chennai. I was stuck inside Chennai, and all the, you can say, the landlines were disrupted and the servers were disrupted. But the social media was sort of a help to reach people who were marooned and to meet people and say, hey, still I am alive. So, sort of, it was very helpful. But I'll tell you, the groups they create with ideology, it's like a fan base, right? They create, and if you want to know how much post truth has been sold, you have to go to that ideological group and check their Facebook likes. The Facebook likes is the
Absolutely right.
intensity of the lies sold in that group. Thank you.
It seems like we need to become more of investigative seekers, because it becomes like where do you really stop, right? Has been so much of a
Yeah,
problem.
definitely. See, in this world, you can't be an innocent poet. You can't be
Yeah.
an innocent lake poet. You can't be walking in the by side of the lake. No, a poet now has to be super smart, like a technocrat, or else we'll be sidelined or killed.
There is a
Okay.
WhatsApp industry going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's
And and we have more and more graduates from there. Uh, uh, okay, so I think the question that Raul raises is important here, and I would invite one of you to take it up. What role has our desire for convenience played in the apparent decline of objective truth? Uh, Probably he's indicating, and correct me, Raul, if I'm interpreting it wrongly, that
Yeah.
this cherry picking of certain kinds of evidence to suit your own promotion of truth is taking you away from the objective truth. I think he's trying to
So, can you
point.
highlight that question?
It's yeah, I can read it out once more for you. What role has our desire for convenience played in the apparent decline of objective truths? um,
I think
Yeah. See,
it is.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, please carry
Yeah,
on,
doc- no,
Selvin.
no, Dr. Anand, you first.
No, I just thought that he's talking of desire for convenience means expediency, and expediency always takes place at the cost of principles, at the cost of regulations, at the cost of truth also, and whether it is objective or personal, it affects both.
mhm. Okay, all right.
Yeah, when it comes to objective truth, the example which I mentioned, the sun moves from east to west. That's very much universal. It doesn't need any mental awareness or mental state involved in that. That's a very uh, crude example which I used, when it moved to some philosophical or metaphysical objective truths, a lot of thinking is involved. What happens is there are two kinds of people. It is very tough. I have the convenience of ignoring that objective truth, at least to understand. No, 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 sorry. I can't understand, so I will ignore.
Mm.
That is one. That is one convenience. Second one is, even though I know it is true, but I will conveniently ignore because my ideology says something different. There are two conveniences. One is stupid ignorance. Another one is smart, cunning, foxy,
Yeah.
neglecting or rejecting. Thank you.
Okay, so
Can I
there's
just have
one,
one? Can I have one point?
there's a question for you actually,
Oh,
Doctor.
can I just mention, just throw it in, cognitive dissonance as well. I mean, if you hold one set of ideas as leading to one truth, and then you have something that is incompatible with that, because someone is now offering you some new information, it's very difficult for the person to embrace both, although they'll try. But it may lead them to actually ultimately question the entire framework of their belief, I think. But sorry, I'll take that as.
Paul, in fact, I would love to add with what Dr. Philip said. I'm reminded of Zizek's book. Zizek has written a book. It is ideology stupid.
Hmm.
I would love to place that in this forum. That's a
Is
book title.
mm,
It's ideology, comma, stupid.
mm, right? Yes,
Yeah,
people adhere to that. Yes, yes, I agree.
yeah. It's Zizek's book. Maybe it's very good to read. Please. Yeah.
Okay, so there is a question for Dr. Philip, and the question is, what is the role of law in post-truth age?
Well, law is like fiction in some respects, in that the cases and the arguments before court are often presenting partial a selection of some aspects of a situation and not necessarily the whole of that situation. So law, like history, has already some elements of post-truths, but clearly law is very interested in minimizing error, in minimizing um, the, the introductions of deliberate lies or false statements that might excuse or mitigate incorrectly mitigate the infraction of the law. So you have. So here, actually, I think this is an interesting point. You have a kind of institutional framework that expects some people to not tell the truth. So you have a situation where at a trial, especially in adversarial common law systems, you have an expectation that there will be at least two sides presented to the story, and that the representatives, the lawyers representing the other side, to the one that you are offering testimony on behalf of, will question you, will try to find flaws in your argument. So a trial typically is not directly a finding of truth, but a finding of falsity. It's an attempt to expose error and misstatements or bad memories. So that's one aspect of law. The other, I think, comes when we are looking at the fact that just as science can be revised, so too can law. Law not only can be re-legislated, so a new statute can override common law, but also on appeal, a previous decision and a verdict can be vacated, can be overturned, can be sent back for reconsideration, or indeed entirely altered. You can also have long established law overturned in very significant cases. In the United States, Brown v. Board of Education in 1954 overturned a precedent that had stood for over 50 years, almost 60 years, in the Plessy v. Ferguson segregation case. But you can also look at English law. In England, in 1991, the House of Lords then overturned what had previously been accepted as an exception to rape law. Up until 1991, English common law had allowed a husband to avoid being charged with rape if he had forced sex upon his wife, because the assumption in English law, established for about 4 centuries, going back to, I think it was Chief Justice Hale, was that you know the woman had given consent at marriage. That was overturned in 1991. They said that this was wrongly decided. It had been wrongly decided for 400 years, but it was also clearly wrongly decided or could not be sustained because it was no longer consistent with the understanding of gender relations that had emerged in Britain in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and leading up to 1991. In other words, there had been a recognition that social reality had changed and the law had to be updated. And the validity, the truthfulness, in some respects, of that previous doctrine, which was called the marital rape exception, allowing married men to avoid being charged with rape inside a marriage, was overturned. And it's been overturned also in the United States. Up until about 1972, you have exactly the same, in many jurisdictions, much the same. And I think in many other common law jurisdictions, you would also find that. So law can be updated, law can be appealed, a case decided by one court can be reviewed and overturned and very substantially revised. The doctrine of law can be clarified and changed. And then, of course, there is... So let me just come back to one of the points about science, and I think that's true of law. We are all fallible. We make mistakes, and lawyers and courts and legislatures make mistakes, and they can, in bit by bit, piecemeal, overcome those mistakes when they are recognized and when an opportunity comes to revisit a previously flawed decision that had long been accepted. So I think, I don't know if that answers the question regarding law and the post-truth era, but I think that mechanism, number one, of an adversarial system, which allows the cross-examination and exposure of error, and number two, appeal and review, and ultimately of legislative repeal. So,
thank you, Dr. Philip. I think we in this panel discussion today, we have actually covered a lot of very important points and touched upon the interfaces of the legal interfaces, literature, information, democracy, politics. A lot of things came together to understand what do we mean by the challenges before literature in a post-truth era. So it's barely 10 to 12 minutes left, so I would switch my request to Dr. Molly Joseph for sharing her ideas, and then we can take forward the session to a conclusion.
Esteemed panelists, Chairperson Dr. Jernail Singh, and of course the very involved audience who are putting in pertinent remarks, points to ponder. Actually, it was a humongous, hardest task to speak on this topic, like the challenges that literature faces. Everything basically filters down to what Derrida once said. Everything becomes an interpretation of an interpretation. So what is truth, post-truth? As Dr. Philip put it, there is a kind of ambivalence. The balance sometimes is on the other, but we get ample means and measures these days to revamp it and then find out the flip side of it. With all this, the ground reality is like we are inundated by simulated truths these days. Leave apart the literatures, the people who write. What about the common man? What is he to take in from those that have been delivered, either through media or through newspaper or through writing? And can we say that as writers, we are all, I mean, taking the kind of stands where we want to uphold the one truth, the one truth universal? Is there anything like that one truth universal? That itself turns problematic, the universality of it, because everything depends on the way you look at it. You can't be didactic about certain truths. They change with the situation. They change with the events, just as Dr. Philip put it. Law changes. You have to actually adjust it or revamp it as per the changing reality. But then, essential values, I would say, ethical values, that do remain. Otherwise, why we still return to Shakespeare, Milton, all those people? The people who spoke what is not only that intellectual kind of thing or what you call the factual kind of thing, actually post-truth refers to more the fictional personal part of it. But then in writing it remains, that lasts, that is there as something immortal. So the discussion had been very, very useful for us who are within the fold of literature, with an eye to write on the right focus, engaging ourselves in a public who need it, the right perspectives on truth. Because as I said, ours is such a troubled time. When history is being subverted for one's interest, universities and the syllabus, they have been becoming a kind of media for the promulgation of some kind of ideology. It happens everywhere. So the onus is on us as literature people to take it up. I'm happy Dr. Jernail ji came up with such a very relevant topic. And I have to thank the panel. And let me start with our dear anchor, Dr. Payel, who put things into right perspective while thinking one thought and another in a kind of succinct way. Thank you, Payel. Thank you, Dr. Jernail ji, the man with a vision, the man who is a thinker and mover of human intellect, human soul. Let our Academy of Ethics hit upon these themes, work on it, and be creative in bringing out new input into what we are doing, we are trying to do. Thank you, Dr. Philip. You were just analyzing it from a kind of a sober, historical, evolutionary point of view. And Dr. Selvin is a friend of mine. Nothing can stand along with his theoretical background, whatever he speaks. So much soaked in the kind of valid theoretical, what you call, foundation. Selvin, it was great listening to you after a long, long time. And then Maja, Dr. Maja, you only kick-started the whole thing. Every time you kick-start it with such a power and force, Dr. Maja. You are the sole part of our International Academy of Ethics, spreading its message worldwide. Our global ambassador, we have to thank you also. And especially Rolle James, Sushi Sharma, all these people, every time they are there. I see Dr. Rasani has joined. Yeah, let us be
Dr.
think
Philip.
tank. Pardon?
Dr.
Yes,
Philip.
I referred to Dr. Philip, especially in the early section, no? How he was going into that law part, how he was historically, analytically, evolutionary way he was analyzing it. You have done a marvelous job, you panelists. And it was indeed, I think the audience would agree with me that it was a very enriching session to think ponder, work on, to alter, as again Dana put it, let us interpret it in a way that grows into something radiant, pervading the whole world. That is it. The pervasive influence of International Academy of Ethics. Let it foster a beautiful world here in this troubled time. And I have to say, Dr. Randeep was the one who is amidst his own busy schedule, sparing out time for all the technical helps, everything, it goes fine with his help only. Thank you, everyone. Dr. Jernail ji, have I left out anyone else?
Thank you very much. you are left. You yourself are left. So
Thank you.
our
So
thanks
we'll
for
meet again. We'll meet again because it is just a series of
yeah, it is
brainstorming sessions we are going to have. We'll meet again. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Payel. So nice of you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure
Dr.
participating.
Selvin, Dr. Philip, Dr.
Thank
Maya,
you.
wonderful company.
Thank you
so much.
for inviting me. Thank you.